Hey guys, I had my buddy Gun Barrel ask me how I was doing the basing on this, if I had any videos for how I was doing this kind of basing. And I don't, but I'm going to whip one up real quick because this is pretty simple. So, let's get started. I'm just going to use a scrap piece of foam here for example purposes, because it really doesn't matter what you're basing on. The process is the same. So essentially the first thing you want to do is cover it with just some white glue. So I'm just going to put a fair bit of white glue on there. And we'll spread that around. Okay, then to get some texture, what I've got here, this is basically, I went out in the gutter in my street and picked up just a cup full of the dirt and grit and sand and stuff that was sitting in there, and I sifted it out with a couple of strainers that I got at the dollar store. I've got one like this. I put it over this one that has a finer mesh, and then put it over a bucket like this, dump it in, and so what I end up with is bigger rocks like this, and one in this thing. Then I get the smaller rocks like this sitting on this one, and then I get all the dirt and dust and little stuff out of the mix. Then I took, so I got the smaller rocks in here. I took some of this decorative sand. I get this because I can get this big old thing of sand for $1 at the dollar store. And just kind of mix it in here. And I use that as the basics for my base. Now, if I had more of this stuff in here, this would be easier, but essentially you just kind of throw it on there. Get a good mix of sand and rock in there. We've got a good basic texture. Then I'll go back with a little bit of glue and get some bigger rocks in there just for decoration. So now the size of the bigger rocks depends on what you're doing. Gun, if you're doing 15 mil stuff, you know, just be careful. I use a lot of this pea gravel, which I had some people in Vent last night asking me what pea gravel was. It's just pea gravel. It's just kind of small, multicolored gravel like this. I use this stuff a lot. Now for the 15 mil Flames of War, you know, the little unit bases, those may be a little big. I mean, there's some small ones in there you could use, but some of this stuff may be a little big. But I tend to use this a lot. This is great for the 28 mil scale. So, you know, just be aware of that. So we're just gonna dot some glue on here in places that I decide I want some big rocks to be. And then just stick the rocks in there. And once that's done, let this dry for at least a good hour, if not longer, before you do anything else to it, or you're just going to have a big mess. So we'll be back when this is dry. Well, here we go. So I let all of the glue dry pretty good, and then I just put a base coat of this brown on. Now what I did, I just watered this down about 1:1 with paint and a distilled water and Flow-Aid mixture. So I don't want it, I'm not trying to do a wash, I don't want it real runny. but I do want it to be able to get down on the cracks and stuff, so I just watered it down about 1:1, and then with a little bit of flow aid to help it flow around. This actually takes up a lot of paint because the textured stuff, the sand, presents a lot of surface area for that paint to get to, so you're going to use more paint than you think to do that. Now, so at this stage, you can put like a sepia wash over this. It'll kind of deepen it a little bit, deepen the shadow. I'm not going to do that for this. Don't really have to, but this is the point to do that if you're going to do it. So what we're going to do is dry brush up a couple layers. I'm using a color called golden brown here. It's kind of a medium brown. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of that on my palette and get a brush. Now I dry brush actually with a soft bristled brush. Most people will dry brush with something like this that's fairly hard bristled and short and straight. I've tried that before. I don't like it just doesn't work well for me. I actually use just a round head, soft bristled, crummy brush. I mean, this is like a 50-cent or $1 brush. Comes in one of those packs. So you get 10 brushes for $5 or something like that. So we're actually going to do a fairly heavy dry brush on the first layer here. And this isn't going to be a real stark contrast. This is just going to kind of deepen the colors a little bit, bring a little bit of highlights out. This is almost going to be an overbrush because there's quite a bit of paint on the brush here. So now, it's pretty blotchy and kind of ugly looking. That's okay. I mean, ground is like that. It's not uniform. So the next thing we're going to do is use Fawn and do a pretty light dry brush. So don't need much of this. I'm just going to put a drop on the palette. Same brush, much less paint. So I'm just trying to hit the high areas now. So we're not going to push as hard with the dry brush. We're just going to kind of glide it over the surface and just let it pick out the high points. So that's it for the dry brushing. Now all we got to do is throw some static grass on there and we'll be done. Now one of the reasons that you really want to let the glue dry for at least a few hours before you start base coating it. White glue, when you put the paint on it, paint's got water in it, and the water will actually reactivate the white glue and make things loose. So you want it as dry as you can get it. That'll help a lot. But if for some reason one of these comes off, you know, you can either glue it back down, or, you know, don't panic. We can fix this. So I'm going to get a bit of static grass here to throw on. I'm going to get a piece of paper under it to catch the extra. I've got this is Flock and Turf from Scenic Express, and this is their what's this called? Farm pasture. It's kind of it's a static grass mix that's got some dark and light greens, a little yellows, a bit of reds, and then it's actually got some clumps of dirt, I guess, are supposed to be like cow patties in there. But it's a nice mix, so I use this a lot. So all we need to do is get some glue. All right, the first place I'm going to make sure I get is the place where my rock came up. So we're just going to cover that up. And then I kind of just pick out some random spots. I'll do some big ones, some little tiny clumps, kind of move it around. Just wherever you think it'll look good. I mean, and it also depends on how sparse you want your grass. Whether you're doing kind of a desert type thing, or you know, real rough areas, rocky areas that aren't going to have a lot of grass. So I just put it on like that. Now I don't water the glue down for the static grass at all. But what I do use is a crummy old brush and actually go and just kind of tap this down. Otherwise you get mounds of stuff and it looks a little weird because this glue is too thick to lay down on its own. So you get the static grass kind of sitting up on mounds. Now you could water the glue down, but I just don't find it necessary. I find this to be just fine. Alright, so that's done. We're just going to take and sprinkle some static grass on there. Now, most regular flock, I would say leave this setting here for a while and for at least a few minutes and let the glue kind of dry a bit and hold it on. But you don't really want to do that with static grass. You want to try to turn it upside down and tap it right away, and it'll help it stand up. If you let it dry too much, you're going to have too much laying down. Now what that's going to do is it's going to leave it a little sparse. That's okay, because if you can see, there's some still some white. I don't know how well you can see that in the camera, but there's still some white glue showing through. What I'll do is just get a clump of it in my hand and kind of tap it in where the glue is, because that'll help some of it stand up. It'll help fill it in. It'll push some of it into the glue, which I know is hard to see. And then turn it over and tap it off again. So, there you go. Nice little base technique. I think that ends up looking rather nice. This is what I've been using on the trees and the fences and the bases for my minis. I do this because that, and I'm actually going to do my board this way, the whole gaming table. So, well, most of it anyway, so that everything will match nicely and look like it goes together. So, hope you enjoyed it. Gun, I hope that helped you out, buddy. And let me know if you have any questions. We'll see you next time.